The Boston Red Sox have made a huge play by trading for White Sox pitcher Garrett Crochet. What does that mean for the Red Sox rotation?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And want to know the best part? It's free, so you might as well continue to tune in because Locked On is here for you every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the show. And what a Wednesday it was. Red Sox fans started the day complaining and being upset at the fact that they missed out on Max Fried and they were worried that this was going to be another offseason like we've seen the last few years. But then in the afternoon, the Red Sox made a statement by trading for White Sox pitcher Garrett Crochet. Now, this guy is an absolute stud. And I'm going to be going over today what this trade means for the Red Sox, what's next, and what they actually gave up for him. And I'm also going to be joined in a little bit here by Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox, who will break down the trade with me from a White Sox perspective. So the Boston Red Sox priority going into this offseason was pitching. Breslow made it really clear that they know that pitching is the need, both starting pitching and from the bullpen. And starting pitching doesn't just mean any starting pitching. It means front line starting pitching. Now, Garrett Crochet showed a lot of semblances in 2024 of being an absolutely dominant pitcher. When we're going in the perspective of pure stuff, his absolute stuff is nasty. 33.1% whiff rate this past season, which was first in baseball. 35% strikeout rate, which is also first in baseball. If you want to be more exact and go to 35.1%, then you'd be exactly where he was at. But filthy stuff there, generating a crazy amount of swings and misses. He has a 31% whiff rate with all 5 of the pitches he throws. His sweeper sits at a rate of about 42.7%, and his heater sits at 97.2 miles an hour, which is the 92nd percentile. So this guy, when you're looking at pure stuff, is absolutely ridiculous. He generates more strikeouts than any other pitcher in the league. And the Red Sox needed strikeout guys. They needed guys who could go out there and lock in on the mound and record outs. And the other thing about Garrett Crochet is he's only 25 years old. So that's really young. So the Red Sox have more to work with. Whereas if you look at a situation like the Max Fried deal to the Yankees, yes, he'll be good for the next couple of years, but they're locked into him for 8 years. And he's already showing some semblances, a little bit of declining based on his postseason performance this past year. Whereas with Crochet, there's so much still to work with and build upon, and being part of Andrew Bailey's pitching lab could be really good for him to really hone in on his skill set. Plus, he wanted an extension in the middle of the season this past year. He had said he was open to talking an extension with the White Sox, but that doesn't necessarily mean he wanted to stay in particular there if he got moved elsewhere. If the Red Sox want to extend him, I'm sure he would definitely extend with the Red Sox. And I would find it really hard to believe that the Red Sox traded for him if they didn't see him as a long-term option and as somebody that they could lock in and extend later on. I just don't see them making this trade and giving up the guys that they gave up for him if they weren't planning on keeping him in a Red Sox uniform long-term. So in terms of the benefits for the Red Sox, he is a guy who can pitch in the front of the Red Sox rotation and can no doubt make them better. Is there a pretty small sample size with him? Yes. 100%. And he had a period of time during the season in which he struggled. Like his month of May was not very good overall, and neither was the end of April for him. But then he got it together June into July and then struggled again in August and September, but not to the point where he's a bad pitcher. By struggle, I mean, was pitching to the tune of a 3.19 ERA in August or a 3.61 ERA in September. So definitely better logistically than other starters the Red Sox have. One thing to look out for is how many innings he's pitching, because in August he averaged 4 innings pitched a start. In September he was pitching anywhere from 2 to 4 innings. So we definitely have to look out for that and make sure that he's able to eat innings and pitch deep into games, which he did show that he can do. He threw 7 innings on April 2nd, and then even in June threw 7 innings on June 13th and only gave up 1 earned run in that game. So he can pitch deep into games and be effective. Another example is June 30th when he threw 7 innings and gave up just 2 earned runs. So he does have starts in which he's shown that he can pitch deeper into games. And I find that with a couple of the Red Sox starters now, Cutter Crawford being the first example that comes to mind. He struggled when he was pitching deeper into games this past season. So in that regard, the Red Sox could use and upgrade somebody who could throw deeper into games and still maintain that same level of effectiveness. So that's something I'm looking at here with Crochet. I understand there are concerns with the small sample size, being not 100% sure if he actually is the ace that he showed this past year and if he's going to be as effective as people think he's going to be. I feel pretty confident that he will be. His raw ability is what is going to get him far. Yes, he can change some things about his pitching technique, and that's where Andrew Bailey comes in and can help hone in on his skill set and what his strengths are. But from a pure raw stuff standpoint, he has among the best in baseball. Now, on the flip side of that, the Red Sox paid a pretty steep price for him, which was not surprising. You don't get a pitcher of Crochet's caliber without giving up some top prospects. You just don't. And one of the top prospects that the Red Sox gave up is Kyle Teel. And obviously that one's a little bit upsetting because Teel was a really highly regarded catching prospect, worked his way quickly through the system. He did run into some offensive struggles in AAA, which would make me a little bit hesitant about his abilities at the major league level. But with the Red Sox current catching situation, that is something that's going to have to be addressed. I know they're in talks with Sean Murphy and a trade for him at catcher to potentially help fill that void, because right now all they have is Connor Wong at catcher, and they don't even have a secondary catcher on the roster to pair him with. We don't know for sure yet if he's actually available, but if he is, that's a move the Red Sox should definitely be jumping on, because then he could be the number one, because Connor Wong is not good enough to be a number one catcher, and I don't think the Red Sox view him as that. But they do need to now address the catching situation after parting ways with Kyle Teel so that they can get more catching in the system, but also get a solid number one catcher. And I think that's what they're going to be pursuing the rest of this offseason, while they also look to add more. So in that regard, yes, Kyle Teel is a pretty big loss, but they also gave up relief pitcher Wikelman Gonzalez, which obviously it's hard to know with pitchers if they're going to pan out or not. The Red Sox have other pitching options. Would I have loved to part ways with him? I wouldn't say that, but if we were going to give up players, he's a guy that I would have been willing to move in a trade, because you really don't know still how he's going to pan out. Then you have 2 more prospects that you traded. Braden Montgomery, who's an absolute stud of an outfielder that the Red Sox drafted this past season in the draft class, and he is special. He was a steal of the draft for the Red Sox, and it was a miracle that they were even able to draft him. So in that regard, he's definitely a pretty big loss too. The White Sox got a good one in him, and he is somebody who will be able to, I'm sure, provide a lot of value. But again, when it comes to somebody like him, he's such an unknown still that you don't really 100% know. Like, do I feel like he's a special prospect that could contribute a lot? Yes, but you don't know with prospects 100%. So you don't make moves for banking on people who aren't guaranteed. So I think it's way too early still in Montgomery's career to know what he's actually going to turn into. And if he turns into a stud for Chicago, okay, we got a really good pitcher from him. And then infielder Chase Meadroth, who the Red Sox also traded in the deal, who I think is going to pan out to be a little bit better than what his anticipated numbers are. But even still, he's an infielder. And if you think about the plethora of infield and outfield talent that the Red Sox have in the system right now, both Montgomery and Meadroth would have eventually been blocked once they got to the major league level because of other guys playing at their positions. Like you still have Christian Campbell playing second base. You also have Marcelo Meyer because you didn't give him up, who will eventually come up and play shortstop. In terms of the outfield, you have Jaron Duran, Wilier Abreu, and eventually Roman Anthony, who's going to come up because you didn't give up him yet. So where would guys like Montgomery and Meadroth actually play? So that's where some of these trades kind of make sense to do, because you have to think about the talent that you have in your system. And if guys are going to get roadblocked, why not move them when their value is high? So obviously I do have a lot of respect for them and I wish them nothing but the best. But in terms of the Red Sox needs right now, which is to acquire starting pitching, this is a good move to add to the rotation. Was it an overpay? No. And the reason for that is because they got Garrett Crochet without having to give up their top three prospects in Christian Campbell, Roman Anthony, and Marcelo Meyer. And they didn't have to give up any active major league talent like Tristan Casas and Wilier Abreu. I'm not saying that I'm ruling out that those guys don't get traded at all, but to think about the fact that they didn't have to give up any of those types of players to get Crochet, that's a win to me. And yes, it's a tough pill to swallow that they had to part ways with a couple studs in the system, but you have to give to get in this league. And Red Sox fans weren't happy that they weren't doing anything. So now here they are doing something finally and making some noise. And they're making a move for somebody who is a solid pitcher who can help in that front of the rotation. And you don't know how those prospects are going to pan out at the end of the day. So I like the trade for the Red Sox. I think it works out really well for them because they went and got a guy who they can extend and is still under team control for 2 years. And they can utilize him at the top of the rotation for the foreseeable future. Now, what does this mean for the rest of the offseason? Does this indicate a message that the Red Sox aren't going to spend money moving forward? Does it mean that they're happy with the rotation they currently have? And what other moves do they have to make? That's coming up a little bit later. But coming up next, I'm going to be joined by Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox, who's going to help me break down the trade a little bit from his perspective. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I highly encourage you to check out FanDuel if you're looking to make lots of money because it could be life-changing. I definitely promise you that. Welcome back to the show, everybody. And it has been a wild 24 hours here for the Boston Red Sox, who a lot of fans were very recently screaming, do something. So they answered that call and they did something and they went and got Garrett Crochet. And I am here with none other than Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox, who recently did a show with me and we were talking about the hypothetical of what could happen if the Red Sox were to trade for Garrett Crochet and what a trade package could look like. And while I am very happy that they didn't have to give up any current major league talent for Crochet, I was a little bit surprised to see them part ways with Teel of all prospects just because the Red Sox don't really have a lot of catching depth right now. So, Todd, what was your initial reaction when this news broke about this trade?
So my initial reaction was, one, it's kind of sad on the White Sox end that, they're one of the reasons why they're trading Garrett Crochet, and I mentioned it a lot on my shows, is they're just not going to pay him. I mean, they're not going to extend them, and it's a sad existence. And then on the other end, they don't use free agency to try to put themselves over the top or cover any gaps in their system. So they had to trade Garrett Crochet to get impact bats because they have a dearth of them in their minor league system. That being said, when I saw the return, I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Although, like I was listening to local radio, there's a lot of people that they're just apathetic too. So I can see that too. So me, I'm like, here we go, because I'm still one of the crazy ones that still watch White Sox baseball and talk about White Sox baseball. And I'm here for my audience. For most of the people that have checked out, I guess I like to watch train wrecks. That's me. But one way to recover is getting Kyle Teel. I'm very happy to get him. And then Braden Montgomery, you and I talked about on the show that we recorded. This is an example of a team giving up a top 100 prospect who still has not gotten to Double-A. So I really like that. And I liked how they got basically a bonus first round pick, basically, because the Sox were very high on him. Potentially they were going to take him with the 5th overall pick. Instead they took Hagen Smith. So I'm like, hey, all right, well, we get now basically we have Hagen Smith now and Braden Montgomery. So I'm happy on that. And then I like the on-base percentage king of Cam Medroth. I butchered his name so many times. Medroth. I mean, that's an on-base dude. And I did my live show earlier, and somebody was saying the live reaction, like, well, on-base doesn't matter. It's OPS. Basic money ball is still on base. Get guys on base, and that's what the White Sox want to do. They want to get more guys that can do this simple thing called he gets on base.
Yeah, no, and you got some good ones in that package. I mean, I was looking at the names that the Red Sox sent away. And while I'm not surprised that they were willing to part ways with Montgomery, because like you said, he's so unproven still, and they don't really know what he's going to turn into. So I think the Red Sox were okay with that risk of, if he pans out, it is what it is, but he still isn't high enough up yet in his career for us to really know what he's going to turn into. He just has so much raw ability and raw talent, and I was very high on him when the Red Sox drafted him. So he is somebody who's going to be special, but ultimately when it comes to the Red Sox and where they're at, they have a plethora of outfield talent in the system right now. So ultimately, chances are by the time he was ready to get called up to the majors, he might have been roadblocked by other players who are already occupying that outfield that the Red Sox currently have. Like, I mean, they didn't have to give up their top prospect in Roman Anthony, who they kind of made clear was a definite no-go. I believe at one point the White Sox did ask for him in a potential Crochet trade, and the Red Sox said absolutely not. So can't really blame them there. But when it comes to the other prospects, you should definitely be very excited about what you're getting. Medroth is great offensively, and he's a guy who I think will overperform what a lot of the numbers and projected stats are for him that they're putting out there right now. I think he's just a really useful player for a team like you who are trying to identify that special type of talent to bring into the system right now. And, when it comes to this Red Sox idea of them not wanting to do anything, I mean, this is doing something for sure. And I think we're getting a guy who is obviously a strikeout machine and is going to generate a ton of those swings and misses. And he's a guy who I think, if he can stay on the field, is well worth the investment for the Red Sox, especially if they're able to extend him.
Yeah, when it comes to staying on the field, I think that's starting to become more and more of a myth just based on it sounds like he developed a workout regimen, or whoever he was working with has developed a regimen that I think is going to keep his arm healthy. And you saw, yes, he got down to 4 innings in July, and there was the August struggles, but then he bounced back and he pitched very well in September. So anything that you've marked out, he has cleared in terms of the hurdle. I'm a little bit surprised, though, that the Red Sox did pay the 4 prospects when, we were talking about this before we started recording, was Dylan Cease might have been there, and his market has been firmly established. It's 3 players. Yes, it's top 100 talent, but it's only 2. And also, and there's been an established market. Now, granted, you only have him for a year, but the Red Sox have a history of extending guys that they do trade for, like they did with Chris Sale. So they must have really, really wanted a left-handed pitcher because, I mean, I was a little worried that they might go pivot towards Dylan Cease as I saw John Morosi's report, because again, Dylan Cease has at least 4 years of very good production, 4 years of over strikeout, 200 strikeouts, 4 years of over pitching 160 innings, where Crochet, the only thing that he had left, the only hurdle he has left to clear is, can he pitch over 160 innings?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest thing too, is the Red Sox do need guys who can eat innings. And obviously they identified Crochet pretty early on as somebody that they were really heavily interested in. But over the past few days, I thought it was a good chance that they would pivot over to Cease. But when it comes to this Crochet situation, there are people out there who think that this was an overpay from the Red Sox standpoint, but it's hard to necessarily say that when we don't know how these prospects are going to pan out, and we don't know if they're all going to be really talented at the major league level. I definitely think the ones that you got have a really good chance of panning out in the majors, but it's really hard to know with prospects. And eventually it gets to the point where you have to give to get. And for a pitcher of Crochet's caliber, we knew he wasn't going to be cheap. I do think 4 is a high number of prospects for them to give up. But I thought there was a chance that maybe they move Marcelo Meyer instead of Kyle Teel, because they do have more infield depth in their system than they do from a catching standpoint. So that's something they're going to have to address. But they definitely really value Meyer as a special player moving forward. So he's another guy who they seemingly want to hang on to. And I feel like the White Sox probably valued the skill set that Kyle Teel could bring more so than Meyer, because of the fact that he is a catcher and you don't always get that type of catching talent.
Oh yeah, I mean, the White Sox love their catchers and returns. I mean, when they did the teardown with the previous GM Rick Hahn in 2023, they grabbed Corey Lee and Edgar Carroll. So they had 2 catchers, and obviously it can never hurt to go up the middle. I've always said that, like, if I were in charge of a team, and when I would be looking at my draft board, I would always be drafting catcher because of the positional versatility and such of the defensive value that you have. Because none of that, if they don't work out, well, you can move them to first or left. I'd be always looking at shortstop because, again, if they don't work out, you can move them like there. You can always move them to second or third. Center field, and then pitching, because center field you can move to outfield spots. So that's the other thing I like about these deals is they got some guys that too have positional versatility. I know Meredith is mostly looking to be at second base, and that was the only thing that I didn't like about when I was learning the scout reporting. I was like, hey, great bat to ball skills. I was looking at his number. I'm like, odd base percentage, great. But then they're like, and he doesn't run very well. And I was like, oh, come on, man. I mean, if you're going to get on base, at least be able to, I hope he has the speed to where it doesn't take 3 balls to be hit to get him home. But when you look at it, as you said, you've got to give up something to get something good. And the thing that drives me nuts when people do say, well, it's an overpay. Well, first of all, prospects are meant to be stars on other people's teams. In reality, what you're really trying to do now in today's baseball is you're trying to find guys that can they potentially hit the ball at the major league levels. And if you have a lot of them, then you can use that to get guys that can help, cover and bridge your gaps. And that's obviously what the Boston Red Sox have built up. They've built up a system where they've got enough guys where you could legitimately say there's a chance that they have to hit at the big league level, but not all of them are going to be able to play. So why not use some of that depth to get a piece? And that is starting pitching. And I wonder where John Morosi was getting his tweet from when he was saying, insiders were telling me the free agent prices are getting sky high. And then, 30 minutes later, he's like, the Boston Red Sox might be trading for Dylan Cease. I wonder where he was getting that from. So clearly it sounds like, to me, I'm just getting on my jump to conclusions, Matt, here. It sounds like Morosi may have gotten his information from the Red Sox saying this free agent market is way too expensive. We don't want to pay the money for, say, Corbin Burnes, who's, hey, I've seen Corbin Burnes pitch, saw him win a Cy Young up in Milwaukee, love him, but his velocity has gotten a tick down. There are some times where he can get a little squirrely. With Garrett Crochet, at least he's 25 years old, and he's only going to cost you $2.9 million next year, and potentially maybe $10 million, $13 million next season. And if you extend him, at the bare minimum, you're looking at maybe a Tyler Glasnow deal of $135 million. Because if I'm Garrett Crochet, that's what I'm demanding: the Tyler Glasnow money.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the options, this was a really good situation for the Red Sox because they knew they needed starting pitching, and not just any starting pitching, front line starting pitching, and getting somebody who's young, is under team control for a couple of years, that they can work with, who has ace caliber stuff, I feel like is something that was so important that they were looking for. And I feel like if you look at the Max Fried deal and you look at Corbin Burnes and the type of money he's going to want to get, I feel like getting this younger guy who just has a ridiculous repertoire is going to work out really well for the Red Sox. Because you, based on watching him in Chicago, do you feel confident that he could be that ace that the Red Sox have been coveting?
Oh yeah, he's definitely. I mean, I wrote something on SouthsideShowdown.com on opening day saying this is going to be the worst starting rotation ever. And the one few things that the White Sox didn't have a problem with was starting pitching, and a lot of it was Garrett Crochet. You know, he goes 6 strong innings in his first career start ever, and I remember everybody was panicking like he's only had 73 career innings. Oh my gosh, he's had Tommy John surgery. This is a terrible idea. And then he just goes out and he dominates. I mean, he dominated the Detroit Tigers, and then he had another start, and then baseball came for him, and he had a 3-game stretch where he just gets rocked by the Cincinnati Reds absolutely tore him apart. The Philadelphia Phillies, that's why I was surprised they were interested in him, absolutely rocked him. And then he comes back and he has 5 outings where he's just basically unhittable. I mean, he that's what I keep saying. He just clears every benchmark that you put in front of him. They said he couldn't be a starter. He's a starter. They said he couldn't be a top-of-the-line rotation pitcher. Makes an all-star team. The only thing that's left that he has to clear is the innings. And the only reason why he was on an innings restriction is 2 years ago he came off of Tommy John surgery. That's a lot to go from 73 career innings to, say, 160 innings. That's a lot to ask of somebody. So they gave him 140 innings, and he was great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I think this was huge for the Red Sox, and they needed to make a statement move like that. And they needed to come in and get somebody who they feel confident in pitching at the front of that rotation. And I think he's the guy, and he could be the future guy too. So we'll have to see how that works out for the Red Sox. But I really like for you what you got in return, because these are some great prospects that you can work with, and hopefully your organization develops them the right way and takes care of our little babies here, because I definitely want to see them thrive. But I appreciate you taking the time to join me and kind of talk about what was the biggest news of the day.
No problem. And, the Sox will try to take care of them, but they didn't do the greatest job of taking care of Yohan Moncada and Michael Kopech. But that was the previous management. Hey, everything's been revamped in White Sox world. Apparently, the front office has been rehauled. It's supposedly sunshine and rainbows. It won't be sunshine and rainbows until they sell the team. So maybe the team, it's sad that I have a fan base. I and my fan base have to hope a person dies for things to get better. So they need Jerry.
That is pretty morbid.
Well, yes, the owner needs to actually pass away for things to get better. They need ownership, and the only way the team is getting sold is if the owner dies. So that's probably the only way your babies are going to get taken care of. But, hey, there's a lot of new cool stuff going on with the White Sox, so maybe there's a chance that they'll hit the big league level, and hopefully they'll rake.
That's what I'm hoping. And Red Sox fans out there, be excited about Crochet, because I really do think he's the real deal, just based on everything I've seen from him, all of his numbers and all of his metrics. He definitely has the ability to be that true number one that the Red Sox have been coveting for years. So coming up, we're going to be talking about what's next for the Red Sox. Is this it? Are they going to make some more moves for the rest of this offseason? If you're looking to save money on tickets for any major event, whether that's a sporting event, a concert, a comedy show, GameTime is 100% the place for you. Why? Because it's a lot cheaper than other ticketing vendors. You automatically see the view from your seat no matter what when you purchase it. And when you are sitting there trying to find the right seats, they always have some sneaky good deals on there. Like, for example, I was looking to football tickets the other day, and I was checking on GameTime, and they had tickets for like $70 in the 100s. For an NFL game, tickets in the 100s. It doesn't really get better than that. So you should definitely utilize GameTime for all of your ticketing needs, because I promise you it will save you money and you'll get good seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? GameTime. I am telling you, once you start using GameTime, your life will be forever changed. I promise you. Well, you heard it from Todd from Locked On White Sox. Garrett Crochet can absolutely be that ace caliber starting pitcher that the Red Sox have been looking for. The innings, which is something I mentioned earlier on the show, is something that he needs to be able to develop a little bit more of. He had been on an innings restriction due to the fact that he had recently recovered from Tommy John surgery. So we just need to get him into that mode of being able to be stretched out and pitch deeper into games, because the Red Sox have had problems with starters not being able to go deep into games in the past. So that's definitely a hurdle to get over for him. But overall, I mean, in 2024, he was an all-star, made 32 starts, 3.58 ERA, 209 strikeouts, and 33 walks. He led MLB in K rate at that 35.1% that I talked about, and Ks per 9 innings pitched with 12.88. He tied for the MLB lead in 10K games with 6. His final 9 starts, he went 27.2 innings pitched with 47 strikeouts and just 3 walks. He also allowed 3 runs or fewer in 15 straight starts from April 29th to July 23rd with a 1.87 ERA. So yes, he had some struggles a couple months where he didn't pitch that well, but overall, he is a guy that if you are a Red Sox fan, you should be really excited to have. And yes, it was a little bit surprising with what they gave up. Kyle Teel, especially because they don't really have catching depth now and need to do something about it. And yes, there is some talent there, especially with Braden Montgomery, who has been highly regarded as a prospect. But you need to give to get in this league. And it's not fair to say right now that it's an overpay when we don't know how these prospects are going to pan out. But I am very excited about Crochet. Too early to say who won the trade. We won't know that for a little bit until we see how the prospects pan out and if Crochet is able to give him that effect that the Red Sox want from him, and if they are able to give him that extension that he wanted. That's going to be a huge factor in all of this. But now that they brought in Garrett Crochet, what's next for the Red Sox? Does this indicate that they are not willing to spend the type of money needed to get Corbin Burnes? That could go either way, but to me, I'm leaning towards no, they don't want to pay Corbin Burnes, because it had already been reported recently that they were hesitant to offer Burnes the type of money that he's going to demand. And to me, the Red Sox being hesitant to pay that, they decided, okay, we need to make another big move in a different way. So they wanted to go out and get somebody who's a lot younger that they would feel more comfortable extending when the time comes, rather than going out and paying a lot of money now for Burnes, because the Red Sox did offer Max Fried 7 years for $190 million, and they were willing to go up, but they wanted to include some deferrals, which Fried and his camp didn't want. But sources really close to his negotiations and really familiar with the whole situation said that if the Red Sox offer had matched the Yankees, then Fried would have gone to Boston. So that's promising, because it shows that free agents are interested in coming to Boston. But I don't think we should expect the Red Sox to also acquire Corbin Burnes. Now, again, they could surprise us. If they get Corbin Burnes, that would be fantastic, because then the Red Sox are looking at a rotation of Burnes, Crochet, Houck, Bayo, and Giolito. And Carter Crawford, who I feel like could be a lot better utilized out of the bullpen, could then be moved to the pen, and his skill set could best be utilized in that regard instead of having him in the rotation. And that would just work out really well, because Tanner Houck is definitely a solid number 2 right now. So if he was your 3, then that shows that you have a much better rotation than you had last season if you were to bring in Corbin Burnes too. But I'm not holding out hope for that. I think the Red Sox sent a message by trading for Crochet that that's our frontline starting pitcher. We don't need to spend the money on Corbin Burnes. And that still comes across like the Red Sox are trying to be cheap and they'd rather not spend money and just acquire players via trade, which is annoying because they haven't really increased their willingness to spend money. And it would be an absolute dream for them to also get Burnes, because they have the money. They can throw it at him. They're not incapable of doing that, because they already threw a bunch of money at Juan Soto and he chose to go elsewhere. So my whole thing is, they have the money to spend, So go and spend it. But my guess would be they're not going to want to spend that money on Burnes now that they have Crochet, and they'd rather spend that money to improve other areas of the roster, like getting a right-handed bat or maybe another solid reliever. So we'll have to see what happens, but that's where I think they go from here. More still needs to be done. They need to address the catching situation, and they also have to acquire another bullpen arm and definitely a right-handed bat before the offseason is over. But this was a great start for the Red Sox. Solid pitcher with really strong and heavy metrics that as long as he can pitch some more innings will be that guy that the Red Sox are looking for, and they should do what they can to extend him after that. So Red Sox acquire Garrett Crochet. Good move for the Red Sox. We'll see what happens from here, but they have to make more moves in order to make it a successful offseason. Thank you so much for tuning into the show and making Locked On Red Sox your first listen always. For your second listen, be sure to tune in to Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who will keep you up to date on all things going on around the league. So if you're interested in hearing more about what's going on with other teams, make sure you tune into his show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. As I always say, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.